Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now, in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence, with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm your guest host, Mike Supina, and I want to throw in a quick disclaimer here. When I'm not guest hosting Access to Democracy, I'm an elected official in the city of Eagan. So any comments or opinions I express here today are my own and not representative of the city of Eagan or the Eagan City Council. Today, I will be chatting with 2 representatives of the community group Listen and Change, which describes itself as a place to grow and provide forward momentum towards social and racial justice in our community. With us today are one of the founders, Pastor Kristen Caple.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Kristen, and an active member of Listen and Change, Elizabeth Mukunga Kingona. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, happy to be here too.
Well, I'm glad you're both happy to be here, because so am I. Let's get started right away. A lot to talk about here. Kristen, could you tell us when, how, and why Listen and Change was founded?
Absolutely. So in May of 2020, after George Floyd's murder, a friend in Rosemount called me and said, I pastored a church in Minneapolis, so I had been pretty active in Minneapolis, but I live in Rosemount. And so a friend in Rosemount called me and said, I just feel like so many of us are sitting around feeling like we want to do something, but we don't know what to do. And so out of that conversation came, we planned an event at Central Park in Rosemount, which the goal of the event was really for white people to listen to people of color in our community, to their experience of what it is like to live in the south suburbs of the Twin Cities, especially Eagan, Apple Valley, and Rosemount. And it was an event where over 400 people attended and really did sit and listen. And it was kind of, I think, the first moment of transformation in our community in terms of building this group called Listen and Change. It was in the middle of a pandemic, of course, so we moved our presence to Facebook. And ever since then, we've just continued to grow and have conversations about systemic racism, talking about how when we know better, we can do better. So for the first year of that group, we did a lot of listening, both to people in our community and around the country, people of color, voices of color, and most recently, we've moved into a more change, so action-oriented. We didn't want to be people who took performative action before we knew how to show up in spaces that need systemic change. And so listening first was really important. So now we're in kind of the more activist phase of that group.
Well, thanks for that. And my wife and I did attend that event at the park in Rosemount back in 2020, and it was really, we all live in our silos. Many of us do, including me, and it was really eye-opening to hear the stories that people were telling there. Elizabeth, could you tell us how, when you learned about Listen and Change, which I think we had said was not right at the beginning, you kind of learned about it a little bit later. What was your experience with it?
So I learned about the Listen and Change group in June, like shortly around the Juneteenth celebration that was at Apple Valley High School. So after kind of learning about some things that were going on at the school board meetings, both in Apple Valley and around the area, I kind of did a call to action in some of my Facebook groups. And when I made the post, somebody had said like, hey, there's a group that you should check out. I think it would really interest you. And it was the Listen and Change group. So once I got that information, I was able to join and then connect with Kristen and a few other like-minded individuals. And we've just kind of been rocking and rolling ever since.
Right, and the group, I believe, has about 1,600, at least as far as the Facebook group goes, has about 1,600 people that are interested. And of course, believe it or not, there are people that don't use Facebook, so there's probably even more than 1,600 people that are interested.
Yeah. There's 1,600 interested, and then we have 350 who have requested to join.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
but we screen people pretty carefully because it's really sensitive work. So
for sure. Elizabeth, I also want to follow up with you. When we were talking earlier, I believe you mentioned that you were a student in District 196 schools. Do I have that right?
Yes, I was.
So, and now you're a parent in the district. So you've seen, Listen Change isn't only about the school district, but school district is a big part of it. And you've seen a lot of that as a student and now as a parent. And what was your experience like growing up in District 196?
Well, yes, I was a student. I attended elementary school, middle school, and then high school for 2 years here. And now I have a daughter that goes to school in the district also. So, I mean, growing up, there wasn't a lot of representation. Well, there was really none. I had a African-American basketball coach, and I think he was like a para at Valley Middle. But before that, I had never had an African-American teacher until high school. I had a wonderful teacher at Apple Valley High School, but there was no representation. There was no place for us to vent or feel heard or really voice any issues that we had at all. So, I mean, I know that the district is taking some steps to rectify that, but growing up, I didn't have that at all.
So do you, and you have a daughter in the district now.
Yes.
How do you think her experience compares to where yours was, and what's still, what's the same, what's different, or if you've been able to observe that?
Well, fortunately, she's still young. She's 8. So, I mean, there's still time for change, but she doesn't have any African-American teachers. She doesn't there is no representation at her school now. So, I mean, fortunately, she has us at home. So if anything were to happen or she wanted to have any conversation, she could, but she doesn't have anybody at school that she could do that with.
So in some ways, a similar experience, at least as far as the school environment goes. I'm going to jump back over to Kristen here about the name of the group, Listen and Change. You alluded to that a little bit earlier. Those two words, you obviously they were chosen deliberately, and what was the significance behind those two words? Why were they chosen, and how are they still relevant?
The significance behind the two words at the time was, I mean, I think, it's, I'll just name that it is not okay that it took the murder of a Black man for us to, wake up and start to listen. But the listen part was born out of our own realization that we had no clue. The daily, not only discrimination, but violence that especially our African-American brothers and sisters face. And the desire to know more, to hear the stories, to really listen to the stories without our own lenses and filters getting in the way, without saying, oh, but, right? But that cop's not racist, but that person's not racist. They just, without the excuses, but just really take all the defenses down and listen to people's stories. Because I think, as we all know, it's in the listening and the relationship with people when we actually have an opportunity to grow and to change. And so, right. So once it's the Maya Angelou quote that always comes back to me is, when you know better, you do better. So the listening is the knowing better, and the changing is doing better.
What have you felt that you've learned in the last year, 14 months since this group's existed? And what kind of connections have you made?
You know what? I've made probably the richest connections that I've ever made in our community, in terms of being able to be in spaces where people care, like really care about people who have been systemically mistreated for the history of our country, and really desire to make a change. I've been doing some of this work for most of my life. I've learned exponentially more in the last year and a half. But I've never been in this kind of a group where everybody was focused on this same thing. I've always been pushing systems, and I feel so surrounded by people like Elizabeth and, Terry and Nikki and Caroline and the other founders of this group, that it really does feel like a really beautiful sort of web, a network of support. And I think as white people, most of us, the founders, right, are white people, we've really had to focus on what it means to, a lot of times, just be quiet and listen. And so I've learned how to do that better. I'm still learning.
Yes, we all probably could use a lesson in that, for sure. Elizabeth, I'll ask you the same question. What connections have you made? I know you've been involved for a few months, basically since the summer.
Yeah.
Do you feel that have more connections in the community, or how has it changed your relationship with others in the community?
I think this group has kind of opened my eyes to what I do have, as opposed to what I did not have. I had no idea that there were so many people in this area that were willing to do this work. I really thought that I was kind of in it by myself, with a few of the connections that I've made prior to Listen and Change, but I had no idea the amount of people that were dedicated to doing this work, that were doing the work. I had no idea. So it's very, very, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a sense of relief in knowing that I don't have to do this by myself. There is a network of people that are willing to put in the work, to listen and take action to make things better for our kids.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard anecdotes after the George Floyd murder where
Mm-hmm.
where white folks especially say, hey, we need to do more.
Yeah.
Let's ask all of our Black friends to teach us stuff. And
Yes.
and I know. Well, has that happened to you, Elizabeth? I'll ask you specifically. And I know that the issue, of course, is why is that my job? I would think, why do I have to teach you not to be racist? So
Right.
I don't. Have you intersected with that experience at all?
I'll tell you, specifically after George Floyd's murder, I had people calling me, not just me, but my husband too, calling, texting, sending messages apologizing to me for things that they have said or done in the past like 20 years. And I was just kind of like, okay, like this is nice. Why are you calling? Like, what is the purpose? But I've definitely had those moments where people will say like, well, what can I do? What should I do? And it's just kind of like, now you want to have this conversation when I've been saying this stuff. But I mean, I guess timing is everything. And I guess
Right.
now is as good as time as any.
Until something happens, it's kind of on the back burner, and then everyone's like becomes aware, which, well-intentioned, I assume, but still, I can imagine there's a little bit of a frustration there. I want to ask you both a little bit about goals. And I know with a group like this, there isn't like a set goal, like, hey, we're done, but, typically there are goals of any group, even if they're continually evolving and moving. And what does success, even incremental success or short-term success, what does that look like? And I'll start again with you, Elizabeth, if you're okay with that. What do you think would be what would be a good outcome of a group like this?
That's a very tough question because I feel like the work is never done. But I think that success for me would be seeing more people of color, African people in more positions of power, or just having more seats at the table. Ideally, we live in a place where like this isn't a conversation anymore. Like it's not a topic. It's just part of life. I think seeing more representation in schools, more African American teachers, more resources for our students, for our parents, and seeing more people not cringe at the topic when like race comes up or equity comes up or like any issues that we do have, just being able to talk about it freely without so much pushback and the shock. I would just like for people to understand like this is a thing, we can talk about it, it's okay, and we just kind of move forward. Like I would just, there's so many things that success would look like, but
as far as your daughter's experience in the schools and when as she grows and becomes an adult, what would you like to see? Kind of what's your aspiration for her, with regard to how she's living in a society that's still predominantly white, and often folks don't get what's going on because it doesn't affect them individually.
I just want her to grow and learn in an environment where, honestly, where she's just looked at as a beautiful Black girl that grows into a beautiful Black young adult, and she's comfortable in her own skin and being herself in school and being able to be herself without having to take a step back and worry about like, am I going to say this in a way that's going to be offensive to someone, or like, are the clothes that I wear going to make other people uncomfortable? I just want her to be comfortable being herself, and for other people to be comfortable with her being herself too.
Cool. And Kristen, I'll kind of throw the same question on over to you. When this group started over a year ago, did you talk about goals? Was that a thing, or was it just like, this is something we need to put together right now and let's do it? Or what do you see as a goal?
Oh, I would say that the goal then was to build an anti-racist community. And the goal now, I think a lot of us are focused on knowing that leadership matters. We see that played out in our country, right? Like you look at, for example, vaccination levels. People who voted for Biden, there's like 88% vaccinated, and people who voted for Trump are like 44% vaccinated. So leadership representation in leadership actually matters. So who we have sitting at the table at school board, at city council, at And so really working on that level to start to set the tone for a truly equitable and inclusive community. So right now we're working a little bit on, school board elections, and who knows what will be next. But I think representation, and then a personal goal. I walked into Starbucks a couple of weeks ago and I had a George Floyd shirt on, and the Black woman behind the counter said to me, "I love your shirt. I don't see very many of those things around this community." And so personal goal would be that we see more of those things around this community.
For sure. People don't feel reluctant to express
Right.
their grief or
Right.
their understanding of what had happened. And you gave me a good segue opportunity there, because today, which is September 17th, when we're recording this, is the first day of early voting in the school board election, which I'll just throw in a quick plug to everybody watching. Please vote, because that makes all the difference in the world. And we're not going to get into individual candidates, but it seems like school board elections often fly under the radar. They're in odd years, and it's not a big money thing like governor or president. But this year, it seems to be getting a lot of attention, and maybe less so focusing on the nitty-gritty of dollars and school funding and things like that, and more so focusing on values, which is probably a good thing for any election to focus on. So since I segued from you, Kristen, I'll start with you. What do you see as the values that are kind of at play in this school board election that we're going to be voting in for the next almost 2 months now?
Honestly, and I'm going to speak as a pastor here, the value of loving our neighbor. And our neighbor, no matter what our neighbor looks like, no matter our neighbor's sexual orientation, no matter our neighbor's gender identification, loving our neighbor, period. And I think that there is a slate of candidates who care about that, and a slate of candidates who care about preserving a white culture.
And Elizabeth, what's have your observations been with regard to the upcoming school board election and how it relates to the values expressed by Listen and Change?
Are you asking what I've seen like at school board meetings, or just,
yeah, we're here today to hear from you. So like I said, I don't want to talk about individual candidates because that's a whole other thing, but yes, what you've seen at school board meetings, I think would be really important. I was tuned into the last one a few days ago, and heard some of the people speaking there, many of whom were really inspirational. But I know in previous school board meetings, maybe less so. So what have you seen that either gave you hope or gave you maybe a little bit of alarm?
Well, what is it, September now? Starting in June, July, August, the first time I went into a school board meeting, I was the only African-American, the only African-American woman. And it was very much a culture shock seeing and hearing some of the things that I heard. There were a lot of conversations about African-American families, but there were no African-Americans at the table or like present in the conversation. It's been hard listening to some of the things that are being said and assumed, but I will say that the last school board meeting gave me a sense of hope, because the speeches, the words, the intent behind some of the things that were being said in support of diversity, equity, and inclusion, in support of seeing more representation at the schools, that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for in whoever is elected, their dedication to making sure that this work continues.
Wonderful. And the folks that are speaking that we're referring to are people in the community.
Yes.
Speaking, parents or sometimes school staff or teachers that are speaking to the school board. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you for some closing thoughts. I'll start with Kristen. Just kind of let me know what your conclusion is of all of this, and then we'll go to Elizabeth, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned through this whole process is if you see an injustice and you don't see anybody doing anything about it, do something. And, little did we know, as a group of suburban moms, that just holding an event and starting a Facebook page could turn into a movement that could really meaningfully support our neighbors our neighbors of color in particular.
And Elizabeth, what do you want to leave us with?
Vote. Do your research. Vote.
Oh,
And
I second that, but keep going.
I mean, just make it a point to stand up when you see something, say something, acknowledge the differences that make us all who we are, who make us all beautiful, and make sure that, you just stick to those values because they're important. They matter. People matter. Our differences matter. They're not something that should be shied away from. They should all be celebrated.
Wonderful. And I have to say, it's just really a pleasure to see people living out their values right in front of my eyes here on this interview and just out in the community. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is mow your lawn or go to the grocery store and put your blinders on and say, yep, I'm living my own life and I'm not gonna worry about what's happening out there. And, it really falls on all of us to worry about what's happening out there because that's what builds our society. That's what makes our society. With that, if neither of you have anything else to add, I want to thank you both for taking the time to come on Access to Democracy. This was a great experience for me, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And that's all the time we have. So I want to thank you so much, Pastor Kristen Caple.
Thanks for the invitation, Mike.
Oh, for sure. And Elizabeth Mukunga Kingona, thanks for coming on to the show and talking about Listen and Change. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What was that?
Thank you for having us.
Oh, for sure. And last thank you goes to Alan Miller for inviting me to host this segment of Access to Democracy. This is the second one I've done, and this is a lot of fun. So anybody else thinks they're interested in this gig, maybe you should give Alan a call and talk to him about it. So take care, everybody, and stay safe. Bye-bye.